Installing a 24V off-grid solar inverter can be quite an adventure.
Oh,
It's not
really?
just plug and play like some people think.
Yeah, I've heard they're pretty involved. What's so intricate about it?
Well, it's all about the wiring. You have to be meticulous with the AC input and output connections, and there are specific steps you've got to follow to ensure everything's safe and efficient.
Safety first, right?
Exactly.
So what's the first step in this process?
First off, you need to disconnect any external circuit breakers before you start.
Right.
It's crucial to prevent any accidental shocks or short circuits.
Makes sense. And I assume the cable thickness matters too?
Absolutely. Using cables that are thick enough is essential. If the cables are too thin, they can overheat. The manual
Yeah.
actually recommends checking the wiring specifications carefully.
So after ensuring the right cables, what's next?
Then you connect the AC input cables in the order specified. Typically, you connect the ground wire first, then the live wire, and finally the neutral wire.
Got it. Grounding is key to prevent electrical hazards.
Exactly. And when connecting the AC output cables, you follow a similar sequence. It's all about preventing any potential issues down the line.
You mentioned grounding earlier. How critical is the grounding wire in this setup?
Oh, it's vital. The grounding wire should be as thick as possible, at least 4 millimeters. The shorter the
Yeah.
ground wire, the better. It reduces resistance and potential faults.
That makes sense. So what about connecting the PV input?
For the PV input, you again need to ensure all external protection devices are off before wiring.
Right.
Then, connect the PV positive and negative terminals correctly.
Sounds straightforward, but I bet mistakes happen.
They do. That's why the manual warns about ensuring the polarity isn't reversed. Reversing the plus and minus can cause serious damage.
Yikes, nobody wants that. What about the battery connections?
The battery wiring requires extra caution. You have to install a protection circuit breaker on the battery side and always
Right.
connect it using O terminals to ensure a secure fit.
I imagine a loose connection could lead to overheating.
Exactly. If the terminals aren't tight, it can cause high transition resistance, leading to excessive heat.
Yeah.
Safety is really emphasized throughout the installation.
It's clear that following the steps meticulously is crucial.
Definitely. And after all the wiring, you need to double check everything. Make sure all connections are correct and firm before powering up.
Better safe than sorry. So, are there any parameters that need configuring?
Yes, there are several. For instance, you can set the output frequency. Typically, it's set to 50 Hz by default, but it can be adjusted if needed.
That's handy. What about the battery settings?
You can select the battery type in the settings. Options
Right.
include sealed lead acid, gel batteries, and even custom settings for lithium iron phosphate batteries.
Customizable parameters are really useful for different setups.
Exactly. And you can also adjust the maximum charging current. It's set to 80A by default, but you can change it based on your battery specifications.
That's important to prevent overloading the batteries.
Right. And the charger source priority can be configured too.
Yeah.
You can prioritize solar charging over grid charging or vice versa.
Flexible for different energy needs. But what about maintenance? Any pointers there?
They recommend doing a thorough check twice a year. Things like
okay.
ensuring proper airflow, checking for any wire damage, and cleaning any dirt or debris.
Regular upkeep keeps the system running smoothly.
Exactly. And they're serious about safety during maintenance. All power sources should be disconnected and capacitors discharged before you do anything.
Safety can't be overstated with electrical systems.
Agreed. Oh, and here's something interesting. They disclaim liability for damages caused by improper use, so it's crucial
Really?
to follow the manual to the letter.
Definitely a good reminder to not skip the manual.
And on a broader note, they mention how a 1 kW solar system can save 170 pounds of coal from being burned in a month.
Wow.
That's a significant environmental impact.
Absolutely. Plus, saving 300 pounds of CO2 emissions and 105 gallons of water.
Exactly.
It's more than just saving on the electric bill.
It's about contributing to a sustainable future.
Yeah,
Companies like Renogy are really pushing for renewable energy adoption.
it's inspiring. But I wonder if the installation process might be a bit too complex for some homeowners.
Well, that's a fair point. It does require some technical knowledge, but many companies offer support or professional installation services.
True, but perhaps making it more user-friendly could accelerate adoption.
That's something the industry could work on.
Yeah.
Balancing advanced features with ease of use is key.
Exactly. So, any final thoughts on the inverter?
Just that it's a powerful tool for those looking to go off-grid.
Right.
With proper installation and maintenance, it can make a huge difference.
And contribute to a greener planet in the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's exciting to see where renewable energy tech is headed.
Absolutely. Maybe next time we can dive into more of those environmental stats.
I'd love that. There's always
Great.
more to learn and share. So I've been reading through this user manual for the 24V Off Grid Solar Inverter, and it's really comprehensive.
Oh, the one from Renogy?
Yeah, exactly. They really emphasize the wiring process, especially
Right.
for the AC input and output.
Well, proper wiring is critical, right?
Definitely.
If you get that wrong, you could have serious issues.
Absolutely. They make a big point about disconnecting external circuit breakers before starting
yes.
any wiring.
Safety first. It's
Yeah.
easy to forget, but so important.
Exactly. And they specify the order. Connect the ground wire first, then the live wire, and finally the neutral wire.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
It's like building a house. You need a solid foundation before anything else.
precisely. And they stress that the ground wire should be as thick as possible, at least 4 mm in cross-sectional area.
Makes sense? You want to ensure a good path to ground to handle
Exactly.
any fault currents.
Totally. And they even mention that the grounding point should be as close as possible to the inverter.
Minimizing the length to reduce resistance, right?
Exactly.
Every little bit helps.
They also go into detail about the PV input wiring. They mention turning off the external protective switch before
Right.
connecting anything.
That's a good reminder.
It is.
You don't want any surprises when handling cables connected to solar panels.
Definitely not. And they mention ensuring that the wires are thick enough.
Yes.
Again, referring to section 2.2 for specifications.
You know, sometimes people underestimate the importance of using the right wire gauge.
Exactly. It's not just about carrying the current.
Right.
It's about preventing overheating and potential fires.
Right? But I wonder, do you think they might be overemphasizing it a bit? I mean, most people would follow basic electrical standards.
Well, maybe, but I think they're just being thorough.
I
After
suppose.
all, not everyone is familiar with electrical installations.
True, can't assume everyone's an expert.
Exactly. They also move on to the battery wiring methods,
Oh.
and they specify using O-type terminals with a 5 mm inner diameter.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah,
They really don't want any loose connections.
exactly. They mentioned that the terminal must press the battery wire tightly to avoid excessive heat due to high contact resistance.
Makes sense. High resistance can lead to serious problems down the line.
Absolutely. And they also include warnings about the dangers of electric shock during wiring.
Well, electricity isn't forgiving. Better safe than
Definitely
sorry.
not. They even include maintenance tips, recommending biannual checks of the system.
Oh, really? What kind
Yeah.
of checks?
Things like ensuring airflow around the unit isn't blocked,
Of
removing
course.
any debris from the heatsink, inspecting for wire damage from sun exposure or pests.
That's thorough.
It's
It's easy to forget about maintenance once everything's up and running.
Exactly, but regular checks can prevent bigger issues in the future.
Definitely. Hey, did they mention anything about the parameter settings?
Oh yes, they have a whole section on parameter settings, like setting the battery type.
Right. Because different batteries have different charging requirements. They list
Exactly.
options for sealed lead acid, gel, and lithium iron phosphate batteries.
Yeah, and they provide standard constant voltage charging settings for each type.
That's helpful. So you can tailor the inverter to the battery you're using.
Exactly, and they even have custom settings if you
Nice.
need to tweak the parameters further.
That's great. It's good to have that
Definitely.
flexibility.
Then they go into error codes and troubleshooting steps.
Hopefully you'd never need that section, but it's good to have.
Absolutely. And they also emphasize safety measures, like not disassembling or repairing the inverter without authorization.
Well, that could void the warranty or worse, be dangerous.
Exactly. They also mention that the company isn't liable for damages caused by misuse, incorrect installation, or acts of nature.
Standard disclaimer, but important to note.
Definitely. And at the end, there's a bit from Renogy about their mission to empower people with DIY renewable energy solutions.
Yeah, I saw that. They really encourage joining their community, Renogy Power Plus.
Which is great, sharing experiences and knowledge.
Absolutely, especially for those new to solar energy.
Exactly. And they mention minimizing the carbon footprint by reducing the reliance on grid power.
That's key. That's the goal, right? Moving
Exactly.
towards sustainability.
They also throw in some interesting facts, like how a 1 kilowatt solar system can prevent burning 170 pounds of coal in a month.
Wow, that's significant. and
It
saves
is.
105 gallons of water.
Right, so not only reducing emissions but conserving resources.
It's a win-win.
Definitely. So overall, it's a comprehensive manual that covers everything from installation, operation, to maintenance.
Sounds like they didn't leave any stone unturned.
Pretty much. And I think it's a solid resource for anyone installing this inverter.
Agreed. Now, if only more people would take the time to read the manual.
Haha, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, it's crucial for safety and proper operation.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for walking me through it. Learned a lot.
No problem. Always happy to chat about renewable energy. Haha, that's not a bad idea.
Right?
We could call it Manual Mavens.
I like it. Hey, have you ever, tried setting up a solar inverter for an off-grid system? Actually, I was just looking into that. It's quite a process, isn't it? Yeah, it can be. So, I came across this user manual for a 24V off-grid solar inverter, and it's packed with info. Oh, really? Want to hear about it? Definitely. What's so special about this inverter? Well, first off, it's designed for DIY enthusiasts who want to get into renewable energy solutions. Nice. It's from Renogy, and they're all about empowering people worldwide to go renewable. That's awesome. So, what's inside the manual? Any interesting points? Oh, for sure. The manual covers everything from the basic system introduction to detailed wiring instructions. They really emphasize safety throughout. Safety warnings like what? Well, like before wiring the AC input and output, they stress disconnecting the external circuit breaker. And they remind you to use cables that are thick enough to handle the current. Oh yeah, that's super important. You don't want any overheating issues. Exactly. And they go into detail about connecting the grounding wire first, then the live and neutral wires. Yep. It's all about following the correct sequence. Makes sense. How about the PV input wiring? They cover that too. They emphasize turning off the external protection switch before wiring. Right. And making sure the polarity is correct. You know, it's like assembling a puzzle, but if you get one piece wrong, the whole thing doesn't work. Exactly. And they give a heads up about the high voltage from the grid input and PV generator. Yeah. So, caution is key. Safety first. Always. Did they mention anything about setting parameters? Oh, they did. There's a whole section on parameter settings. For instance, you can set the output frequency to match your local grid, 50 or 60 Hertz. Okay. And adjust the battery type and charging voltages. That's pretty handy. Different batteries need different charging settings. Exactly. They support various battery types like sealed lead acid, gel, even custom user-defined settings. Nice. What about maintenance tips? Anything on that? Yes, they recommend twice yearly inspections. Right. Like making sure there's no debris blocking airflow, checking for wire damage from sun exposure or pests. Pests? I didn't think about that. Critters chewing on wires? Yeah, exactly. So, they advise cleaning any dirt or corrosion as needed. Yeah, good to know. So overall, the manual is pretty comprehensive? Absolutely. It's thorough and user-friendly. They even include troubleshooting tips and error code explanations. That's helpful. Sounds like Renogy really cares about their customers. Totally. They even include a section about their mission to promote sustainable living and energy independence. Oh, that's awesome. You know, companies like this make renewable energy more accessible. Exactly. And they mention interesting facts, like a 1 kW solar system can save 170 pounds of coal from being burned in a month. Wow, that's impressive. If more people switch to solar, imagine the impact, right? And saving 300 pounds of CO2 emissions too. That's significant. Makes me think about installing a system myself. You should. With manuals like this, setting it up isn't so daunting. True? And the benefits are huge. Absolutely. But wait, did you mention earlier about the O-terminal connections? Oh yeah, for the battery wiring. They recommend using O-terminals with an inner diameter of 5 millimeters. It ensures a secure connection to prevent excessive heating. Wait, wouldn't a larger terminal be better for better conductivity? Well, actually, the size they recommend is optimized for the system's requirements. Going too large might not fit properly. So sticking to their specs is important. I see. That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying. No problem. They also remind users to double-check all connections are tight and correctly polarized. Yeah, better safe than sorry. Hey, does the manual say anything about warranties or liabilities? Actually, it mentions they're not liable for damages caused by improper use or unauthorized repairs. Makes sense? Following the manual is crucial. For sure. And probably not a good idea to tinker with it without proper knowledge. Definitely not. They also caution against exceeding temperature limits and voltage ratings. Oh yeah. Important to keep the inverter within its specs. That's common sense, but good to be reminded. Exactly. Overall, it's a solid manual for anyone looking to set up an off-grid solar inverter. Agreed. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I feel more confident about tackling a solar project now. No problem. It's exciting stuff. Yeah. Renewable energy is the way forward. Couldn't agree more. Let's get started.